Well, good afternoon, everybody. I do not know what happened to Mark Maneri. I, like you, have been waiting for him to jump on here and kick our little webinar off this evening. I am sorry for the delay. This is Larry Walters broadcasting from just outside of Orlando, Florida. And I presume Mark has run into some kind of uncontrollable circumstance that has prevented him from being available this evening. So we will do the best we can to cover the overview, and since the special topic is as simple as it is, we should be able to ad-lib that a little bit, especially with the help from the brains that we have out here in the attendees field. We've still got people signing in, which is good to see, and I hope somebody out there will send me at least one message and let me know that you are hearing me and that everything is coming through okay. You see my screen, which should be saying here in a second, Americans for Fair Taxation, with the websites for both the national site, fairtax.org, and our Florida organization site, flfairtax.org, with the Florida logo beneath that. So I'm looking for messages to come through here and see if we're getting somebody out there who's responding. I do see a large list of names, so I know there are still people out there. We're going to get this kicked off. I'm not seeing anything that says I can't hear you or I can't see you or whatnot, so we'll presume that everything is going along okay here. And we'll just move right ahead. Get my cursor out of the way. Let's see if we can go to the first step. Well, everybody knows that the income tax system is an albatross. It really suffocates our economy. It suffocates us as individuals. It takes many of the liberties that we were assured when the founders created and endorsed the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights. That being said, back in 1913, some smart aleck, super wealthy people decided they would like to take control of the world's finances and have a central bank, and one way to do that would be to get rid of the sovereignty of the United States. In doing so, they created an income tax system. Interesting story how they started that, but they interviewed and got Woodrow Wilson to agree to run for president. In this case, it was on the Democratic ticket. President Taft, who was the incumbent, was dead against an income tax system, and he was very popular. And these people who wanted to have a central financial bank knew that they could not overcome President Taft. So what they did was they got Woodrow Wilson to agree to run for president, and then they got some third-party duck to run as independent and split the vote from the Republican Party. And with less than 50%, Woodrow Wilson became the president, and his cabinet was literally staffed with members of the Council on Foreign Relations. And President Wilson was, in fact, I think I said Roosevelt a minute ago, that was in error. President Wilson was, in fact, a puppet and had virtually no say in what was going on. He just mimicked the storylines that were provided to him by the cabinet members that were on his staff. So as we see now, we've got just a ton. We're over 72,000 pages in this illustration, and we have since learned that we're up over 75,000 pages. It's obvious that this is something that no single individual can comply with, and we have found through experiences that were done by other organizations doing research that you can take the exact same tax return, send it out to 6 different professional tax preparers, and none of them would come back with the same return. So there's just too many nuances, too many places where a decision can be made in one direction or another, and it's a bear, it's an albatross. So what do? Well, we replace that rascal. We get rid of the income tax system, and I cannot overemphasize this at this time. As you may have heard in last month's webinar, we are very certain that next year there's going to be tax reform. And what we as volunteers and as supporters and advocates of the fair tax, what we need to do is be very adamant about getting on our congressmen and our senators and the members of the Ways and Means Committee, that might be a member of your state's legislature, or not the state legislature, but a member of the U.S. Congress from your state, and let them know that in no way are they going to get any support from you for anything if they are going to advocate some kind of another convoluted income tax system. We don't care if they call it a flat tax. It's still a tax on income, and it's something that we just do not want to handle. What's the answer? Of course, we know it's H.R. 25 in the House, S13 in the Senate. Very simple legislation. Both of them are identical word for word. We've got 70 co-sponsors in the House right now, 10 in the Senate, sponsors and co-sponsors. And it's more than we've ever had in the Senate, and it is too shy of the maximum we've had in the House. We've still got some time before the end of the year to get a couple more people on board with this, and we need to try and do that. What does the fair tax do? Well, for individuals, it replaces every mandatory federal income tax system that is available. It literally abolishes Sections A, B, and C of the 1986 Tax Reform Act. Don't know if you are aware of this, but that Tax Reform Act from 1986 has been modified more than 14,000 times since then. That's the kind of thing that we are trying to avoid, and that's what the fair tax will avoid if we as people, after implementation of the fair tax, don't just go to sleep and think that government is going to do everything as they are expected to. We will have to maintain a vigilance and be sure that our Congress, your individual congressional representative and United States Senator, doesn't go off the deep end and start playing games with the tax system again. So the fair tax eliminates the personal and corporate income taxes. No more taxes on business. It eliminates the state and gift. The alternate minimum tax, which many of you have been caught by surprise on. It eliminates capital gains, which means if you own anything, for example, real estate property, or if you have a home that is valued very highly, there would not be a tax on any gains you make when you sell those properties. Self-employment taxes go away, and Medicare and Social Security taxes are no longer withheld from your paycheck. So you take home a full paycheck, something that nobody listening to this tonight has ever experienced. We have not known anything but an income tax. And as a result, sometimes we have a difficult time understanding the workings of our consumption tax because we're trying to look at it through the prism of an income tax mentality. And that can be confusing. At least it was very difficult for me early on. And how does it work? Hey, all new consumer goods and services. I repeat that, new goods and services are taxed only once. There is no tax on used goods, so you can certainly save some tax revenue if you purchase used clothing, used vehicles, boats, airplanes, houses, you name it. If a tax has already been paid on it, that's the end of taxing on that particular item. It'll never be taxed again as the fair tax is written. What is the tax? The rate is 23 cents out of each dollar. Depending on how you want to calculate that as an internal or an external tax, it would be 23 cents or 23% tax calculated internally, just like our income taxes are calculated. If you want to calculate it as an add-on tax to the new lowered cost of whatever the good or service is, then it would be a 30% tax. Needless to say, whether you calculate it at 23% or 30%, it is still just 23 cents out of each dollar at the cash register. And since there is no tax on business-to-business production costs, that means that those taxes are eliminated from going through the supply chain and added to the final cost to the retailer and then paid for by us. The research that was done, and most of you are well aware that there was over $20 million of research done by half a dozen economists who specialize in tax issues, and they determined, among other things, that everything we buy today is increased in price by 20 to 25%, and that depends on the particular industry that the item of good or service is coming out of. So we've really cleaned up the system, and in taking away that money that is taxed to businesses, corporate taxes, taxes on goods that they might buy for implementation into their own product, by eliminating all of those costs, by eliminating the costs of taxes that are being withheld from employees, by eliminating the FICA, or not the, yeah, the FICA tax, that is the, quote, employer's contribution to your Social Security Medicare account. With all those taxes going away, the prices of the goods go down. But what that does is that makes the United States of America the business and investment haven of the world. And if you think of it in those terms, then it's easy for you to understand that the last thing we want is for some other country to implement a fair tax type system before we do, because then they will become the business and investment capital of the world. They will have the leg up on us, and we'll be chasing somebody else again. And some people ask me, well, has another country done this yet? Has another country implemented a fair tax type system yet? And I can't overemphasize, no, thank goodness, no. We don't want them to do it. We want to be first. Why, in your mind, do you think that the United States is so feeble that we can't take the lead on something as important as this? I don't know. Some people I just don't understand. Understanding our current retail pricing system, you pay income taxes and a federal sales tax now, which is what I was talking about when I referred to the embedded costs. The embedded tax is approximately 22% on average on all retail goods, and the business income taxes are passed off to the consumer. Prices will increase marginally. We are estimating 5 to 10%, and then eventually will decrease a little as competition naturally drives prices downwards and stabilizes everything in the nation. The prebate is an element that was put into the system, and it is technically called the Family Consumption Allowance. The prebate assures that no one who is a legitimate resident in the United States, who has a valid Social Security account in this country, will pay any of the federal taxes up to the poverty level, which essentially says the essentials of life are not going to be taxed. Now, why do we do the prebate instead of just not taxing clothing, food, shelter, transportation, etc.? And there's two reasons for that. One, as soon as you open the gate to exemptions, that's the slippery slope for more. It's the ballpark of the tax lobbyists, and we do not want to give them any fields to play on. So that's one reason we do not want to exempt anything from taxation, other than, as I said, used goods. Secondly, if you think about it in these terms, let's say, for example, that food is not taxed under the fair tax. It is exempt. You and I may go out and we'll buy a lower cost steak or hamburger or something like that. And let's say we pay, just for the sake of an example, $1 a pound for hamburger. I know we'd like to see it there again, but let's just use this as an example. So on that dollar, if it were not taxed, we would save 23 cents. Somebody who is wealthy, wealthier, super wealthy, you name it, they're in a higher category of lifestyle than we are. They would go out and they'd buy a better cut of steak, and they might pay $5 per pound, $10 per pound. If that were exempt, they would be saving at the $10 rate $2.30, where we saved 23 cents. So as you can see, exemptions naturally are a greater benefit to the higher income people than they are to the lower income people. So by not having any exemptions, everybody is treated exactly the same. And that was one of the goals of the fair tax, to be administered equally to everybody, and one of the things that assures that is a lack of exemptions. Here's a look at the looks like the 2011 exemption table. This one wasn't updated with the outmark on this afternoon. I didn't have the more current one to display. So we can use this because it gives us the example. If you're a single person, your poverty level or your consumption allowance is considered to be $10,890. These numbers are published once a year in January by the Department of Health and Human Services. And what they're saying is that somebody who is earning $10,890 or bringing home $10,890 will spend every penny of that on the essentials of life. In that case, they would receive a check once a month administered by the Social Security Administration of $209. That pays them in advance for the 23% on the $10,890 they're going to purchase. Let's look over to the married family household side for just a moment. A family with 2 children in it. That's 4 people total, the family size. Their income, their income according to the poverty line is $29,420, and they would receive a check of $564 each month. That is 23% of the $29,420 and divided by 12 for the monthly installments. And as I said, that would be administered by the Department of Social Security. All right, what's the benefits of the fair tax for trade and federal government? Well, I hope I can snuff out that telephone. I don't know how to shut that off right now. The U.S. becomes a corporate headquarters haven. I mentioned that. We've got $11 to $13 trillion in U.S. personal and corporate assets parked offshore. They would be repatriated without penalty. And if you can recall, just a couple of months back, I think it was March, Apple announced very publicly that they would not return the $60 billion in foreign profits to the United States until the tax system is changed. That's a strong message, folks. And then more recently than that, one of the co-sponsors, or one of the co-founders of Google, relinquished his American citizenship and took up citizenship elsewhere in order to avoid the penalties of the United States income tax system. Do I agree with what he did? No, he's not really an American anyway, so good riddance to him. However, the message is strong. Our system stifles production. It stifles people investing and making profit. So we've got 2 great examples there of why we need to get rid of this income tax system and get rid of the taxes that are assessed on people who even profit from foreign investment. Remember the deal where Mercedes and Chrysler merged, and Mercedes decided to have their corporate headquarters in Germany. Why? Because the tax system there was a little more palatable for them. And Facebook, I just talked about, Facebook moved their headquarters from California to Ireland, I believe, to avoid the tax system of the United States. More examples of why we need to get rid of an income tax system. We've got over 50 million visitors each year to this country, and that would be a stream of revenue that goes directly into the economy, not a stream of revenue that just goes to processing and complying with the tax code, shuffling paper around. So it becomes part of our GDP, which is greatly needed. And our underground economy. That's the IRS is estimating at over $1 trillion. That becomes new revenue stream. What is the IRS? What is the underground economy? It is people and or small businesses, which is people, who are either not reporting any income or underreporting their income or over-reporting deductions in order to reduce their apparent income and therefore paying less of the income tax system. Under the fair tax, we don't care where they get their money from. It just does not matter. All they need to do is buy something that's new and they're going to contribute to the system. That's a pretty neat idea if you think about it. Okay, so we're moving along right now here pretty well. Let's see if I can, looks like there we go. And yes, you heard that correctly about the $11 trillion. It flows back into our economy. By far, the most effective economic stimulus we can bring to our country. And if you consider, and many of you have seen it on the tagline on my emails, that if we had the fair tax when President Obama and company were trying to get the stimulus package of just under $1 trillion passed, we would not have needed this government to take taxpayer dollars to uplift the banking industry, the auto industry and whatnot. There would have been private money available to invest, and those private investors would have done a job to straighten out those businesses and make them work right under the economic system that we know works so well, which is, we call it free enterprise. How is the fair tax collected? Well, 45 of the states already have an income tax system, so they're just need a little bit more computing power, some minor program changes to calculate the 23 cents out of the dollar at the cash register, and they are off and running. The advantage is that under the fair tax, unlike the income tax, we have approximately 18 to 20 million retail businesses that the states would be collecting from individually for their own state. Versus right now the IRS has to deal with somewhere between 120 and 130 million tax returns from businesses and individuals. That all goes away. None of us, nobody, business, individual, ever has to file a federal tax return again. If that doesn't kind of take some stress off of your back, you're an iron person. You really know how to take the punishment. I've had enough of that. Only one state sales tax form to file, makes it simple again, and states and retailers are paid 0.25%, 0.25% for an administrative fee for their collection of the national sales tax, the portion that they've done. Okay. So if you think about this, it's all pretty simple, and you can understand why the compliance costs are going to be reduced from like $430 billion a year to maybe 10 to 15 or 20% of that amount. We don't know exactly what that will be, but it's going to be a lot less than what it is now. And that means that there is more money available to go into the economy for consumption or to be saved. And sometimes people say, well, yeah, if everybody saves money, what good is that going to do? Think about this. What do the banks do with money that is saved, that they have available? They lend it out, don't they? Which means interest rates will come down. The economists predict approximately a 0.25% reduction. A 0.25% reduction in interest rates. And if interest rates come down and there's more money available, that means there's more money for businesses or homeowners or want to be homeowners to borrow in order to purchase tools for their business, add employees, maybe get into a larger facility, or in the case of an individual, to buy an upgraded home or to upgrade your home. So there's, when money is available, it makes it easier for us to expand. Our consumer economy does better. Anyone whose income, who will be opposed to the fair tax? Anyone whose income is derived from the current tax code. Now let's face it, politicians are our number one opposition. Our Congress, both the Senate and the House, and in some cases the White House, and certainly cabinet members and other officers within the administrations are not in favor of getting rid of the income tax system. They benefit greatly from the fact that if, for example, a House representative will support some kind of a loophole that gives a tax benefit to some special interest, that special interest returns that support with campaign funds for re-election campaigns. And if you look at your incumbents, those that have been in office, say, more than 4-6 years, chances are very, very high that they are getting more campaign contributions from outside of their district and outside of their state than from within their district. And that is a sad story, in my opinion. I would not be opposed to legislation that restricts contributions to any campaign that comes from outside of the district or the jurisdiction of that politician's territory. That would certainly help give the people more voice, don't you think? Lobbyists will be opposers, IRS workers, because a lot of them are going to be put out of their existing jobs. It doesn't mean they're going to lose work. Some of them are in a position to retire, so they will just atrophy out. Others will take positions in other departments of the government. And let's face it, if you look at an IRS agent, he is an investigator. He is like a detective. He could be used in the CIA, the FBI, Homeland Security in general, but there are many areas in which we could use more support. It's unfortunate, I think, that we have more IRS agents investigating the citizens of the United States regarding income taxes than we have both agents from the CIA and the FBI investigating real threats of crime and terrorism in this country. That is kind of sick. And some accountants whose primary income is on tax returns will be opposed to this. We understand that, but you know what? These are educated people. They should be able to find work in another segment of their particular educated environment. How do you become a better knowledgeable supporter? Read the book, FairTax The Truth by Neil Bortz and John Linda. John Linda was the congressional representative who was the original sponsor of the FairTax Act into legislation in 1999. And he rode that wagon for several years. Last year he did not run for re-election and has been replaced by Congressman Rob Woodall out of the same district, who is doing a yeoman's job of promoting the FairTax, just not only in the House and in the Ways and Means Committee, but to people across the country via various messages and YouTube videos and whatnot. So you can look up Rob Woodall and listen to some of the messages that he's put out. He's a dynamic and very, very animated speaker. So get a copy of this FairTax book for yourself, and don't be afraid to get one that you might be able to hand out, or 2 or 10. They're available pretty inexpensively now on Amazon.com. So go ahead and get that. And as far as sending a copy to your congressman or senator, I would not do that arbitrarily, because many have already been provided copies. But if you get an opportunity to go and visit with them and ask them if they have read that book, and if they have it, if they say no, then certainly feel free to provide one for them. We use here in Central Florida a postcard petition system to do 2 things. One is to register new supporters into the FairTax, into Americans for Fair Taxation. Secondly is to get a message from these new supporters to their congressional House representative and their United States senators. And so you see here, this one is set up for Florida, and our 2 senators are Senator Nelson in the upper left-hand corner and Rubio in the lower right-hand corner. In the upper right-hand corner, you got Dear Representative, because we've got so many congressional districts in Florida, we don't know who the representative might be that this particular new supporter is filling out the application for. So we fill that in for him. We just require his signature on the back and any note that he wants to put into it. Now we send one also, as you see in the lower left-hand corner, to the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. Right now that is Congressman David Camp. The front simply has the location for the return mail address of the new supporter, and we fill in with the label the representative's address and the address for the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, and we've got the addresses for the senators locked down because they don't move around as rapidly. Okay, and what do you do? How do you get in contact with anybody? Well, fairtax.org is certainly the mothership, and that is the umbrella on which the rest of the states fly under. In Florida, flfairtax.org, and we have fairtaxnation.com, which is an organization that is working in conjunction with Americans for Fair Taxation, and they are very active and doing a lot of hard work to get the message of the Fair Tax out to as many people as possible. And they would certainly appreciate your support, as will fairtax.org. But I'd say your first step, if you are not registered with fairtax.org, is to do that. Do that very first, and get on the mail list so you get the Friday Fair Tax newsletters if you're not getting them now. And certainly anybody that you might talk with that has become interested in the Fair Tax, get them to register with fairtax.org first. And then if you're in Florida, fairtax.com, floridafairtax.com. And of course, third but not last, of course, is fairtaxnation.com. All good organizations. Okay, we're going to go into the special topic in a moment, but before we do that, we're going to see if I can find any questions here that are being raised. And as soon as I get the right button pushed, we will find out what is going on. I've got 88% of that. That's good. Well, list. I do not see any hands raised here at the moment. This is interesting. That means either everybody is absolutely knowledgeable. Let's see what I got going on here. Okay. Well, look, it looks like we don't have any questions raised at all. I've got a ton of people out there. Goodness gracious. And I see no messages. Okay, well, I think then I would like to ask that if somebody would please, especially if you have a microphone, on the little control panel on your unit, you should see a hand, the icon of a hand. If you would click on that and raise your hand, that lets me know that you have audio capability, and I will catch that, and I would like to hear if you are hearing me. Now, if nobody has a hand, if anybody will just type a message into the little type message here box at the bottom of your control panel, I'll pick up on that message and see if we're being heard by everybody. Otherwise, I do not know what to do. And I'm going to send a message to everyone right now that just simply says, please type here. All right, send a chat to the entire audience. Looks like that didn't go. Let's try it again. All right, we'll try it one more time. There we go. Okay, send message here is the message that went out. And hopefully we'll see somebody responding to this. I'm looking for a name here that I might be familiar with that has a microphone working. Well, I can't say I see one right off the top. Okay, well, we're going to move on then. I will have to make the presumption that everybody is hearing me since they're still on board, and we'll talk about the special topic. Now, the special topic for tonight was supposed to be how can you get involved, and I'm going to have to ad-lib this because I do not have the slides that were made available for it. I think this is pretty common sense. I've already talked about a little bit of it. One way of course, is to be sure that you will communicate with your congressional House representatives and United States senators. You can do this via telephone, call their offices in the local area from which you live or in Washington, D.C. With most people using cell phones these days or unlimited long distance on their landlines, it doesn't cost you anything in the way of long distance charges to call the 202 area code in Washington, D.C. and get directly into the office of your House representative or U.S. Senator. And of course, if you've got a local call in the district in which you live or in the state, you have access to them in that manner also. Further, beyond contacting them by telephone, you can send them a fax. You can send them an email. Some of them, you can go to their website, their government website, and it's usually something like john.doe at, I think it's mail.house.gov, something close to that. And you'll be able to send them a message via their internal email system. I would suggest that if that's the only way you can get in touch with them, in other words, you do not have their direct email address that you can use your email program for, use their house system, their government house system, and after you've typed your message, but before you send it, copy that message, highlight the entire message, copy it into a notepad or a Word pad or a Microsoft Word or whatever your text capability is on your computer. If you're using a Mac, whatever they're using, copy that and save it to your computer so that you have exactly the message that you sent to them. And then go ahead and send the message. Now, you'll probably get a reply. It may not be what you're expecting. It'll sound very generic, very appeasing, if you will. In many cases, if it's somebody who is not yet on board with the FairTax, they will quite frankly either tell you they don't think it's a best idea, they prefer the flat tax, and we know that that's just a bad excuse, or they don't know enough about the FairTax yet, but they'll feign that they do, and they'll say some words that give you the impression that they are supportive of the FairTax, and they will, in essence, be pandering to you. You have to listen very closely to what they say as well as what they don't say, and based on your knowledge of the FairTax, the income tax, and whatnot, determine if they're telling you the truth or if they're just kind of appease you. Okay? So that's the second way you can get in touch with them, via email. Fax is a third way. Letter mail is good, but if you send a letter mail, I would send it to a local office. When you send letter mails, sealed letter mails to Washington, D.C., it goes through the mill the mail mill in, I think it's in New Jersey, for screening for anthrax and other potential hazards before it gets to the office of whomever you sent it to. And a lot of that mail, I'm afraid, doesn't really quite get through, and some of it just gets damaged even though it gets processed through the system. There are people every place that handle this mail that are opposed to the fair tax, and they will do little things like dump coffee on it or something like that to make it illegible. So send it to their local office, and it will go directly from there via their courier to the office in Washington, D.C., and you'll be okay. All right. Now, what else can you do to be involved? Well, certainly it's very important, and I can't overemphasize this, that you know enough about the fair tax and enough about some of the negatives of the income tax to be able to tell the story, to be able to share the story about why the fair tax is so much more desirable a solution than any form of income taxation. Remember, of all of the tax proposals that are being floated around, some have legislation, most at this time do not, but of every one of those tax proposals that are floating around, they are all some form of tinkering with an income tax system. We have got to get rid of that, or we'll be strapped with that for life. Here's the deal. If next year in 2013 Congress passes some form of a flat income tax, and it doesn't matter what it is, there is an excellent chance that come the 2014 midterm elections, we lose some of the seats of supporters for the fair tax. Once that trend starts, it can be 6, 8, 10, 12 years before America wakes up again and says, oh my gosh, we really made a mistake by not getting the fair tax passed back in 2013. We've been stuck with this thing, and now we've got to almost start all over to build the grassroots support again. Is that what you want to do? I don't think so. I think we would like to see the fair tax passed and passed now, and we have got to do some work to make it happen. We can't rely on George to do it. Quite frankly, if you think about that, George, and I'm referring to Washington, did his part. He gave everything he had to free this nation from the grips of the king at the time and of England, and to give us the liberties and freedoms that were ultimately written into our Constitution. We've lost a lot of that because we've sat on our assets and not been paying attention to what was going on. We've elected the same old familiar names to office election after election after election. We've been lethargic when it comes to taking care of our government. We have to get off of that. And you guys are here, so I know you're doing that. I'm suggesting you step up just a little bit more. Take a little more time away from some of your personal pleasures and put it into getting the fair tax out, getting people educated that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. If you're involved in any of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, any of them that you might belong to, use those media to share the story about the fair tax. Develop some dialogue with people and answer questions from them. And if you have a tough time with a question, send your question into fairtax.org, or send it to me at repeal_16@earthlink.net, and we'll get an answer back for you. Now, I got to tell you, I'm one person. I can't answer everybody's. I will do the best I can, but if I can't, I will get that question to somebody who I know can get an answer for you, and you can get a response to whomever is asking that question. So that's how you can be involved, folks. Just taking more action on your part. All right. I guess I'm going to end it right there. You've got the idea on what needs to be done to get involved. You've got the idea on what the fair tax is about, and I hope you will find a way to not only join us again next month, when I hope Mark will be back from whatever it was that took him away tonight, and that you'll bring somebody with you. You'll bring some new people with you. Have a little home meeting with some chocolate chip cookies and some coffee or something like that, and a few people who, I've heard about this fair tax thing, but whoever, there's no such thing as a fair tax. I mean, let's face it, you hear all kinds of silly excuses why people are not aware of what the fair tax is about. And you can help do that. Something else you can do that I did not think about, and that is start addressing your local state legislatures, your House representatives and your state senators. Within your state, That's the people that are closest to you when it comes to needing your vote. And those are the people that, believe it or not, these folks they are absolutely clueless for the most part on what the fair tax is about. And what surprises me about that is that here they are, operating, living citizens of the United States of America, being burdened by the same income tax system that you and I are burdened about, and most of them haven't taken the time to find out what is this fair tax thing. Why do we want to get rid of the income tax? What is so good that the fair tax can do that the income tax doesn't do? They're clueless. They need you to take that proverbial 4x4, smack them across the forehead to get their attention, and then start educating them after you put a cold pack on their head to reduce the swelling. But that's something that we need to do. In Florida, we've got a mission on the board right now working to get a legislative memorial done. This is simply a letter that is approved by the majority of the legislature in both the House and the Senate in the state of Florida that goes to the United States House and the United States Senate saying, hey, folks, this fair tax thing, we want you to implement it. We want you to get this thing on the books, and we are in total support of it. Please take action on this as soon as you possibly can. So it's a showing of power of support from the legislature of the state of Florida. You can start that in your state also. It's not easy to do, but doggone it, it's worth the effort, folks, if we're going to get rid of the income tax system. What do you want to live with in your life, in your remaining life? An income tax system or something that's much more favorable to all of us, a consumption tax system? And if you're not interested in it for yourself, how about thinking about what it will mean to maybe your children or your grandchildren or even others that that are special to you, that you would like to see them have a little easier go of life without having the burden of complying with 75,000 pages of convoluted code. Come on, you can help. You know you can. So please do that. Okay, and we're back to the beginning. So that's about it for tonight. I'm going to take one last look here and see if I've got any questions popping up. And if I don't, I have to tell you honestly, I am going to be very, very disappointed, because what that says is that either I didn't say anything of interest, or I was very boring, or all of the above, and that you hung in there for some reason, but I don't know why. And all I want to say is God bless you anyway. We've got a very, very important mission on our hands. And if you happen to be in Florida, by the way, we are going to be at the FairTax.net rally in Tampa this coming Sunday afternoon. If you can, I encourage you to get there from between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Get there a little bit early. We're going to have 2 FairTax booths at the event, plus a Winnebago motorhome that is wrapped in FairTax logos and has FairTax signs with expressions of support on them and knowledge. And come on out, help us, wear your FairTax shirts, hats, bring a sign if you have one. If you don't have one, grab a yard sign somewhere and put it on a stick so you can wave it. But we need to show the press, and we need to show the colleagues, the delegates from across the country who are coming into Tampa, that there is large support for the fair tax. And we need to let them know also that we'll help them learn what it's about. But if they don't get on board, they will not get our support. Now, you have to take that with a grain of salt. There are cases where we've got no choice but to vote for that particular candidate, regardless of his position of the fair tax, because of who his opposition is. But there are cases also where they know, and we can let them know, that this would be their last free election. After this, we'll find another candidate to run against them in a primary, and we'll put somebody in there who is an advocate for the fair tax. So that's it. One more scan. I do not see any questions, and I do not understand that at all. My goodness gracious. No questions. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much. I appreciate you being on board. Look forward to seeing you next month. I can't tell you what the special topic will be, but it'll be something else of unique interest, something which is not typically discussed or talked about as we do presentations. So it's just a little bit more information to put in your bag of tricks on what the FairTax is about. Have a good night and a great weekend, everybody. Hope to see some of you in Tampa, and the rest of you, I hope that we will see you next month on, I think it's September 27th. Have a good night, everyone.